The man's panic is unmistakable. Officers responding to the call described him as pale, shaking, and truly convinced he'd seen something impossible. What he reported that night would become one of the most terrifying and famous Bigfoot encounters ever documented, and one that authorities still refuse to publicly explain.
911, what are you reporting?
I got a strange going on out here. Something just killed my dog.
Something killed your dog?
My dog went flying through the air over the tree, and I don't know how it did it.
Okay.
Damn it, I'm really confused. All I saw was my dog coming over the fence, and he was dead when she hit the ground. I didn't see any cars. All I saw was my dog coming over the fence.
2 weeks after the first incident, the creature returned, and this time the man claimed it was closer, watching him from just beyond the glow of his porch light. To this day, no official report has ever confirmed what he saw. But those who heard the original tape insist one thing: whatever visited that man's yard wasn't human.
911, what are you reporting?
We got someone or something crawling around out here.
Did you see what it was? Was it a person or an animal or?
I can't tell. All I know is that my central light came on, and I just happened to glimpse and see this thing running across the yard. A good-sized man, or something that looks like a man. I don't know what it was, just that it ran across the yard.
Okay. You've had problems in the neighborhood before?
Yeah, my dog was killed here just recently. I don't know what it was. Whatever it is, it's running. I couldn't catch it if I was going to chase it. So whatever it was standing up. I'm out here looking through the window now, and I don't see anything. I don't want to go outside. Jesus Christ, you better...
Sir?
Dio!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh. Okay, hang on.
He's right...
Is he in your yard, sir?
Yeah, God, he's big.
Okay, what's he doing in your yard?
He's looking at me.
Oh, and the guy is on foot.
I don't know what... It's a big, real big person. That's all I can say.
Okay, but it is a person.
Yeah, I'd say it was a person, somebody really big. But he's all in black.
Is he a black male or a white male? Did you actually see or was he just wearing black?
He's all black and he's big. He is big.
It killed my dog, that's what I told the 911 dispatcher on February 8th, 1996. But the truth is so much worse than that. My 100-pound German Shepherd didn't just die, something folded him in half like paper. The deputy who responded measured 18-inch footprints with a 7-foot stride and whispered, "I've seen these before." 2 weeks later, they came back. 3 of them, throwing rocks that embedded in my walls, tearing my door off its hinges while I hid in the bathroom with a rifle, praying the sheriff would arrive before they got through. But here's what really haunts me. After federal agents showed up with no badges, I found my father's journal, 20 years of entries about visitors he'd been feeding. A treaty I never knew existed. The government classified those 911 calls. The property's now a restricted wildlife preserve. And I changed my name and disappeared. What are they so desperate to hide? I need to tell you about the place first. Because without understanding how isolated that cabin was, you won't understand what happened there. My name is Dennis Paulson, and in 1996, I was 43 years old, working swing shifts at the Bremerton lumber mill, living alone on 12 acres of Washington wilderness that my father left me when he died. The property sat outside Seebeck in Kitsap County, where the Olympic Mountains throw these long shadows across the forest that make sunset come 2 hours early. You could drive 3 miles down a logging road that hadn't been maintained since the 70s, and if your truck could handle the washouts and fallen branches, you'd eventually find my driveway, though calling it a driveway is generous. It was more like a deer trail that happened to be wide enough for a vehicle. The cabin itself wasn't much to look at. My dad built it in 1971, just him and a couple buddies from the mill. Single story, wood stove for heat, a generator for power, because the lines didn't run that far out. No phone lines either, which meant I had one of those old Radio Shack cellular phones that worked maybe half the time if you stood in the right corner of the property and the weather was clear. After I got back from the Marines in '78, I'd spend weekends up there with him, learning the routines that kept a place like that running, where to stack wood so it stayed dry through winter, how to read the creek levels to know if the access road would wash out, which parts of the property to avoid during elk season, unless you wanted to explain to some trigger-happy hunter why you weren't the 10-point buck he thought he saw. But by 96, it was just me and Thor. Thor was a German shepherd, about 4 years old, 100 pounds of muscle and loyalty. I'd gotten him as a pup right after Dad's funeral, telling myself it was for security. But really, I just couldn't handle the silence. You don't realize how quiet a place can be until you're truly alone in it. Thor had this training from the breeder military-grade stuff that made him responsive to hand signals, voice commands, the whole deal. Not that I needed a war dog out there. Mostly, he was just good company. Our routine was simple. I'd work my shift at the mill 2 to 10 most days, then drive the 40 minutes back to the property. Thor would hear my truck coming up that dirt road from a mile away, and by the time I parked, he'd be waiting by the door, tail wagging like he hadn't seen me in years instead of hours. We'd do our evening walk around the property perimeter, him marking his territory, me checking for wind damage or signs of trespassers, though, honestly, nobody came out that far. Except lately, Thor had been different during those walks. Started maybe 2 weeks before that night in February. He'd stop suddenly, ears forward, staring into the darkness beyond where my porch lights reached. Not growling, not barking, just watching. I'd shine my flashlight where he was looking, but there was never anything there. Just trees and shadows and occasionally the eye shine of a deer or raccoon. Getting jumpy in your old age, I'd tell him. But the truth was, it made me uneasy. Thor didn't spook easy. In 4 years, I'd seen him face down black bears without flinching. But something about those February nights had him on edge. The nearest neighbor was 3 miles north, an old Korean War vet named Carl who came out maybe once a month to check on his hunting cabin. The closest year-round residents were in Seebeck proper, a good 20-minute drive on roads that turned into rivers when it rained hard enough. This isolation was exactly what I'd wanted after Dad died. A place to just exist without having to explain myself to anyone. A place where I could work, come home, have a beer on the porch, and not think about much of anything. I know now that isolation wasn't protecting me from the world. It was preventing the world from knowing what was really out there in those woods. February 8th, 1996, started like any other Friday. I pulled into my driveway around 10:45 after my shift and immediately knew something was off. Thor wasn't at the door. I found him inside, pacing between the windows, this low whine coming from his throat that I'd never heard before. "What's wrong, boy?" I asked, but he just kept pacing, wouldn't even come for his usual welcome home ear scratch. His food bowl from that morning sat untouched. Thor never skipped meals. I checked his water full. Felt his nose cold and wet, so not sick, but he wouldn't settle. He'd go to the back window, the one facing the deep woods, stand there for a minute with his hackles half raised, then pace to the front window and repeat the pattern. The forest outside was dead quiet, and I mean dead. No owls, no coyotes yipping in the distance. Even the usual rustle of small animals in the underbrush was absent. If you've never experienced true forest silence, it's hard to explain how wrong it feels. Woods are never quiet. There's always something moving, calling, living. But that night, it was like someone had thrown a blanket over the whole world. I tried to shake it off. "Storm coming in," I said to Thor, though the sky was clear. Sometimes animals sense pressure changes before we do, but even as I said it, I knew that wasn't it. I'd lived through plenty of storms on that property, and Thor had never acted like this. I heated up some leftover stew, tried to watch the small TV that pulled in maybe 2 channels on a good night, but Thor's pacing was getting to me. Every few minutes, he'd freeze, head cocked, listening to something I couldn't hear, then back to pacing. Around 11, he stopped at the back door and started pawing at it. Not his usual, "I need to pee" scratch, but urgent, almost frantic. "You were out 2 hours ago," I told him, but he kept at it, adding these sharp, demanding barks. Look, I should have known better. Every instinct I developed in the Marines was telling me something was wrong. That kind of forest silence, a trained dog acting spooked, these were warnings. But I was tired, irritated, and frankly, I thought Thor might be sick and needed to get outside quick, so I opened the door. Thor shot out like he'd been launched from a cannon, straight into the darkness beyond the porch light's reach. Not his usual pattern of sniffing around the deck first, marking the usual spots. He went straight for the tree line about 60 yards out, barking with an aggression I'd only heard once before, when a black bear had gotten too close to the cabin the previous summer. "Thor, get back here!" I called. But he was gone, swallowed by the darkness. His barking changed as he hit the trees, deeper, more guttural, fighting sounds. I grabbed my maglite from the hook by the door, one of those heavy police-issue ones that doubled as a club, and stood on the deck, shooting that beam into the woods. "Thor, come!" I used my command voice, the one that always brought him running. The barking intensified, then suddenly changed to something else. Yelping, high-pitched, painful. The sound a dog makes when it's hurt bad. Then it cut off, not faded away. Not wound down, just stopped, like someone had flipped a switch. The silence that followed was somehow louder than Thor's barking had been. My flashlight beam wavered as my hand started shaking. 43 years old, combat veteran, and my hand was shaking like a teenager's. "Thor?" My voice came out smaller than I intended. Nothing, not even wind in the trees. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds, though it felt like an hour, waiting for Thor to come trotting back, maybe limping from a porcupine encounter or bleeding from tangling with a coyote. But deep down, in that primitive part of your brain that millions of years of evolution has, trained to recognize danger, I knew Thor wasn't coming back. I had to go look. He was my dog, my only companion. Even if something had happened, even if it was bad, I couldn't just leave him out there. But first, I needed more than a flashlight. I went back inside and grabbed my father's .30-06 from the rack by the door. It was an old Remington 700, the bluing worn from decades of use, but Dad had maintained it religiously and it shot true. My hands were steadier with the familiar weight of it. The maglite in my left hand, rifle in my right, I stepped off the deck and started toward the tree line. The beam of light carved a tunnel through the darkness, but it only made the shadows on either side seem deeper. Every few steps, I'd sweep the light in an arc, checking my flanks. Old habits from the jungle, even though this was Washington State, not Vietnam. "Thor?" I called again, though I knew it was pointless. The spot where he'd run into the trees was maybe 60 yards from the cabin. As I got closer, my light picked up the disturbance in the pine needles and duff clear signs of a struggle, dark patches that I knew would be blood even before I got close enough to confirm it. Then I saw him. Thor was. I don't know how to describe it without sounding like I'm exaggerating. His body was twisted in a way that shouldn't have been possible. His spine was bent at an angle that made my stomach turn. Whatever had done this had grabbed him and just folded him, like you'd fold a piece of paper. The strength required to do that to a 100-pound dog was beyond anything I could process. But that wasn't what made me freeze. It was what was standing over him. The beam of my flashlight hit it full on, and for a second, neither of us moved. The light reflected off its eyes, first that green shine you get from a deer or a cat, but these eyes were set at the height of a basketball rim. As my brain tried to make sense of what I was seeing, the beam illuminated the rest of it, 9 feet tall, minimum, covered in dark hair that was matted and tangled, not fur like a bear, but hair like what you'd expect on a person who'd never seen civilization. The proportions were wrong for a human, though arms too long, shoulders too broad. Its face was partially hidden by the hair, but I could make out features that were almost human. Almost. We looked at each other for what couldn't have been more than 3 or 4 seconds, but time does strange things when your adrenaline spikes. I could see it breathing, see its chest rising and falling. Steam came from its nostrils in the cold February air. There was intelligence in those eyes, not animal instinct, but actual thought. It was evaluating me, just like I was evaluating it. I should have raised the rifle, should have done something, but I couldn't move. It wasn't fear exactly. I'd been scared plenty of times in my life and knew how to push through it. This was different. This was my brain simply refusing to process what my eyes were seeing. The creature, and I don't know what else to call it, broke the standoff first. It didn't run. It didn't charge. It simply turned and walked into the forest with a fluid grace that something that size shouldn't possess. 3 strides and it was beyond my flashlight's reach. I heard branches crack as it moved away, but even those sounds faded quicker than they should have. I stood there for another minute, maybe 2, the rifle still lowered, the flashlight beam shaking slightly as my hand trembled. The rational part of my brain was already trying to rewrite what I'd seen. A bear standing on its hind legs. Some guy in a suit playing a prank. Anything but what my eyes had actually witnessed. But then I looked down at Thor again, at the impossible angle of his body, and I knew no bear had done this. No man either. Not even the strongest man alive could have done this with their bare hands. I backed away slowly, keeping the light pointed at the forest, and made it to my cabin without turning around. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely dial 911. The old rotary phone on my kitchen wall seemed to take forever to connect, each rotation of the dial stretching out while I kept glancing at the windows, expecting to see that face peering in. 911, what's your emergency? The dispatcher's voice was calm, professional, probably dealing with her 10th call of the shift. I opened my mouth and nothing came out at first. How do you explain what I'd just seen? There's something killed my dog, I managed. Sir, are you injured? Are you in immediate danger? I don't know. Maybe. It's still out there. What's still out there, sir? Was it a bear? A cougar? No, it wasn't a bear. My voice cracked. It was. It was huge. 9 feet tall, walking on 2 legs. It killed my dog with its hands. There was a pause. I could practically hear her, reassessing the call, probably figuring she had a drunk or someone having a breakdown. Sir, have you been drinking tonight? No, I haven't been drinking. Listen to me, there's something out there that's not supposed to exist. It killed my dog, twisted him up like a pretzel. I saw it. Green eyes, covered in hair, arms like tree trunks. Okay, sir, I need you to calm down. What's your name and location? Dennis Paulson. I'm on Forest Service Road 42, about 3 miles past the Seebeck Highway turnoff, the old Paulson place. All right, Dennis, I'm dispatching a unit to your location. Are you somewhere safe right now? I'm in my cabin, doors locked, I've got a rifle. Good. Stay inside, don't go back out there. The deputy should be there within 40 minutes. 40 minutes? My voice went up an octave. That's the fastest we can get someone to your location, Dennis. Just stay inside and stay on the line with me. I wanted to hang up, wanted to board up the windows, wanted to get in my truck and drive until I hit Canada. But I stayed on the line, describing again what I'd seen while she asked questions designed to keep me calm and probably assess my mental state. Dennis, you said it was 9 feet tall. How could you tell? It was standing next to a Douglas fir that I've walked past 1,000 times. I know exactly how tall that first branch is because I have to duck under it. The thing's head was above it. And you said it walked away? It didn't run? Walked, like it wasn't afraid of me at all, like it knew I wasn't a threat. We went back and forth like this for what felt like hours, but was probably 20 minutes. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. Dennis, we've had other calls from your area. Similar reports. The deputy will know what to look for. Other calls? What do you mean, other calls? I can't discuss other incidents, but Deputy Harlan has responded to wildlife complaints in your area before. He'll take your report seriously. Wildlife complaints. That's what she called it. Like someone's garbage cans getting knocked over by raccoons. Finally, I saw headlights coming up my driveway. The sheriff's cruiser pulled up to my cabin, and Deputy Jim Harlan got out. I recognized him. He'd been working this area for years, had come by when Dad died to make sure the property was secure. I met him on the porch, rifle still in hand. Dennis, he said, nodding. Dispatch said you had some trouble. My dog's dead. Something killed him. Something that shouldn't exist. Harlan looked at me for a long moment, then at the rifle in my hands, then out toward the tree line where Thor's body lay. Show me, he said simply. No skepticism, no jokes about Bigfoot or drinking. Just, show me. I led him out there with our flashlights cutting through the dark. When we reached Thor's body, Harlan crouched down, examined him without touching anything, then stood and played his light around the area. I'm sorry about your dog, Dennis. Thor, right? I remember him from when I was here last year. Deputy, what did this? He didn't answer immediately, just kept sweeping his light across the ground. Then his beam stopped, and he whistled low. Dennis, come look at this. But don't step there. Step where I step. I followed his exact footsteps to where his light was pointing. There, in a patch of soft earth between the pine needles, was a footprint. But calling it a footprint doesn't do it justice. It was massive, clearly showing 5 toes, a ball, and a heel. Human-like, but impossibly large. I need to get my kit from the car, Harlan said quietly. We're going to document this properly. Deputy Harlan returned from his cruiser with a tackle box that had seen better days. Inside were plaster of Paris, mixing containers, and a camera that looked like department issue from the 80s. He worked methodically, like he'd done this before, which made me wonder exactly how many times he'd been called out for something like this. 18 inches, he said, measuring the print with a tape measure. 7-foot stride between this one and He walked. Several paces, his flashlight searching. This one here. I watched him work, noting how carefully he avoided looking directly at me while he documented everything. He took photos from multiple angles, the flash turning the forest into a stark landscape of light and shadow. Then he mixed the plaster, pouring it carefully into the clearest print. "This'll take about 20 minutes to set," he said, finally meeting my eyes. "Dennis, we need to talk about what happens next." "What do you mean?" He sighed, looked around to make sure we were alone, which was absurd given where we were, then spoke quietly. "The official report is going to say this was a bear attack. Maybe a rogue male, unusually aggressive. That's what's going to be filed. But you're taking casts, photos. You can see this wasn't a bear." "I can see a lot of things." He pulled out a cigarette, offered me one, which I declined. "Been working this county for 15 years. This isn't the first time I've made casts like these. Won't be the last." "You've seen them before, these things." He didn't confirm or deny, just took a long drag. "There are places in this county, Dennis, old places, where things happen that don't make it into reports. The department knows, but what are we supposed to do? Tell people that there's something in these woods that shouldn't exist? Cause a panic? Have every yahoo with a rifle out here shooting at shadows? So you just cover it up. We keep the peace. That's the job." He dropped the cigarette, crushed it under his boot. "But I'm going to give you some advice, off the record. You might want to consider staying somewhere else for a few nights. Visit friends in town. Take a vacation. This is my home, my father's home. Your father isn't here anymore, Dennis. And whatever this is," he gestured at the prints, "it's not done with this place." While we waited for the plaster to set, Harlan helped me wrap Thor's body in a tarp from his trunk. The way the deputy handled him, gentle and respectful, told me he understood what it meant to lose a dog. We carried him to the side of my cabin where I'd bury him in the morning when there was light. "That should be set now," Harlan said, checking his watch. We walked back to the print. He carefully lifted the cast, perfect in every detail. Even in the plaster, you could see the dermal ridges, the scarring on what would be the ball of the foot, details that would be impossible to fake. "This goes in the evidence room," he said. "Officially, it's from a bear investigation. Unofficially," he trailed off. "Unofficially what?" "Unofficially, there's a whole filing cabinet full of these, dating back to 1978 when I started. And the deputy before me, he had casts. 2 passed them on when he retired. How many people know? The ones who need to know." He packed everything carefully back in his tackle box. "Dennis, I meant what I said. Consider staying somewhere else. These things, they're territorial, and once they've made a kill somewhere." He didn't finish, but he didn't need to. "Can't you do something? Set up surveillance? Get state police involved? With what evidence? Footprints that officially don't exist? A dog that was officially killed by a bear?" He shook his head. "The best thing you can do is give it some time. Let things settle. They usually move on if you don't provoke them." 2 weeks. That's how long I lasted, trying to pretend everything was normal. I went back to work at the mill the Monday after Thor died, but I was useless. Couldn't focus on the saws, which is a good way to lose fingers. My supervisor, Gary, pulled me aside after I nearly walked into a moving forklift. "Dennis, what's going on? You look like hell. Just not sleeping well. This about your dog? I heard what happened. Damn shame. Bear getting him like that." Even Gary knew the official story. "Yeah, something like that." He sent me home early that day, told me to get my head straight, but home was the problem. Every night, those motion sensor lights I'd installed would trigger. I'd rush to the window, rifle in hand, but never saw anything. Just the lights clicking on in sequence, first the one by the tool shed, then the one by my truck, then the one on the back deck. Like something was circling the cabin, testing the perimeter. I started finding tracks every morning, different sizes, which meant there was more than one. They'd come right up to the windows, the prints clear in the frost on the deck boards. Some mornings, there'd be handprints on the glass, too high for any normal person to reach without a ladder. I called the sheriff's department 3 times. The first time, they said they'd increase patrols. Never saw a single cruiser. The second time, they said there had been no other reports, and maybe I was seeing things. The third time, the dispatcher, different from the night Thor died, suggested maybe I needed to talk to someone about grief and trauma. So I started drinking. Not proud of it, but it was the only way I could sleep. Half a bottle of Jack Daniels would knock me out for a few hours, though I'd wake up at every sound, sweating and reaching for the rifle. The worst part, was the isolation. I couldn't talk to anyone about what was really happening. Tried once with my buddy Steve from the mill, and he looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Started avoiding me after that. Can't blame him. February 20th, I found the deer. It was just inside my property line, maybe 50 yards from the cabin. What was left of it anyway. Something had torn it apart. But not like a cougar or bear would. Those predators eat what they kill, efficiently, following patterns. This was different. The deer had been opened up, organs removed and set aside like someone performing an autopsy. The hide was pulled back in neat sections. Bones were cracked open for marrow, but arranged afterward in almost anatomical order. It was curiosity, not hunger. Something had taken this deer apart to see how it worked. I threw up when I found it, right there in the snow. Then I went back to the cabin and called in sick to work. Couldn't leave the property unguarded anymore. Couldn't pretend this was going to just go away. That afternoon, I drove to Silverdale and bought more ammunition than any sane person would need. The clerk at the sporting goods store made a joke about me starting a war. I didn't laugh. Also bought more lights, stronger ones, and a motion-activated camera from Radio Shack. 35mm film, nothing fancy, but maybe I could get proof. I spent the rest of the day turning my cabin into a fortress, boarded up the windows I didn't need, moved my bed so I could see both doors, set up fields of fire like I was back in basic training. The camera I positioned to cover the back deck, hidden behind the porch light where it wouldn't be obvious. That night, I sat in my kitchen with the lights off, rifle across my lap, watching the tree line. Around midnight, the motion lights started triggering again. This time, I saw shadows moving between the trees. Big shadows, multiple shadows. They were back, and they weren't trying to hide anymore. The siege was about to begin. The Kitsap County Library in Bremerton had that smell all old libraries have: dust and binding glue and decades of fingerprints on paper. I spent my day off in the basement archives, going through old newspapers on microfiche, looking for anything that might explain what was happening on my property. The librarian, a woman in her 60s named Margaret, kept giving me concerned looks as I scrolled through reel after reel. I must have looked rough, hadn't. Shaved in days, probably smelled like the bourbon I'd been using to sleep. Finding what you need? She asked around noon. Looking for animal attacks in the Seebeck area. Historical stuff. Writing a book? Something like that. She left me alone after that, which was good because what I found made my hands shake. October 1924. Logger found dead in woods. Bear attack. Suspected, but the details didn't match. Body found, twisted, in unnatural position. March 1953. Family abandons homestead after mysterious harassment. They'd reported rocks thrown at their cabin, livestock killed, massive footprints. August 1971. Search called off for missing hunters. 2 experienced men vanished near where my property would be, only their empty camp found. Pattern after pattern, always explained away, always in the same general area. You, Dennis Paulson? I looked up to find a man in his 70s standing beside my table. Weathered face, Forest Service cap, the kind of thick hands that came from a lifetime of outdoor work. Who's asking? Robert Kearney, retired ranger. Margaret called me, said someone was digging into the old stories. He pulled out a chair, sat down without invitation. Buy me a beer and I'll tell you what you really want to know. We ended up at the Whistling Oyster, a dive bar near the shipyard. Kearney didn't say much until his second beer, then he started talking, voice low enough that the other patrons couldn't hear. Worked the Olympic Peninsula for 32 years. Official position is, there's nothing out there but bears, cougars, and elk. Unofficial position? He took a long drink. There are places we were told not to patrol alone. Your property sits right on the edge of one of them. You've seen them. Once, 1981, was checking on an illegal logging operation, way back in the forest. Came around a ridge, and there were 3 of them, digging. Roots, with sticks, they'd shaped. Not sharpened shaped. Deliberate tool use. They saw me, I saw them. And we all just froze for maybe 10 seconds. Then they walked away. Not ran, walked. Like they knew I wasn't going to follow. What did you do? What I was told to do when I reported it. Forgot what I saw, filed a report about the logging operation, and never went back to that area. He signaled for another beer. But I kept track. Every incident, Every sighting that came through unofficial channels. Your dog, that was a warning. A warning. They're territorial, but they're not mindlessly aggressive. They understand boundaries, probably better than we do. Your dog crossed into their space, marked territory they consider theirs. They eliminated the threat and gave you a message at the same time. So if I just leave them alone, it might be too late for that. Kearney's expression darkened. Once they've established a conflict with a specific location, they don't forget. They have memory, probably generational. They'll keep pushing until you leave, or he didn't finish, or what, or you become another unexplained disappearance. February 22nd started with those sounds Kearney had warned me about. Wood knocks, he'd called them. Deliberate strikes against trees that echoed through the forest like a drum line. I was sitting in my kitchen, rifle loaded and within reach, when the first one came from the north. A solid thok that resonated through the walls. Then an answer from the southeast. Then another from directly behind the cabin. They were communicating, coordinating. The sun was setting, that gray Pacific Northwest dusk that makes everything look like a watercolor painting running together. I checked my ammunition for the 10th time, made sure the motion lights were all working. The camera I'd set up had caught nothing the night before except shadows that might have been anything. The knocks stopped around 7. The silence that followed was worse. At 8:13, the first motion light triggered, the one by the tool shed. I watched through the kitchen window as it blazed to life, illuminating nothing but empty ground. 30 seconds later, it went dark. Then, the one by my truck lit up. Same thing, nothing visible, light times out. They were moving in a pattern, testing the coverage, learning the system. I picked up the phone to call 911, but stopped. What would I say? The lights I installed are turning on? They'd think I was losing it completely. At 8:45, I saw them. 3 shapes at the edge of the forest, just outside the reach of my lights. Upright, massive, patient. They stood there for maybe 5 minutes, not moving, just watching the cabin, studying it. Then they spread out, one moving to each side of the property. The first rock hit at 9 to 10. It struck the roof directly above me, a crack like a gunshot that made me jump. Then another against the north wall. Then rapid-fire impacts, like being inside a drum during a solo. Some of those rocks had to weigh 20 pounds or more, thrown with the force of a major league pitcher if that pitcher was the size of a grizzly bear. I grabbed the phone and almost dropped it when the living room window exploded. Glass scattered across the floor, and cold air rushed in, carrying a smell that made my stomach turn like a wet dog that had rolled in something dead, but worse, muskier, wilder. I stumbled to the bathroom, slammed the door, and dialed 911 with shaking fingers. 911, what's your emergency? This is Dennis Paulson, Forest Service Road 42. They're attacking my house. Multiple intruders, throwing rocks. They've broken through. Another impact shook the entire cabin. Through the bathroom door, I heard my kitchen window shatter. Sir, did you say rocks? Are these people throwing rocks? They're not people. I was shouting now, couldn't help. The same things that killed my dog 2 weeks ago. They're around my cabin. They're trying to get in. Dennis, I'm dispatching units now. Are you somewhere safe? Bathroom, door locked. But there I stopped, listened. Heavy footsteps on my porch, the deck boards creaking under immense weight. Dennis, stay on the line with me. The back door, solid oak with a deadbolt, made a groaning sound, metal straining, wood splintering. Then a crack like a tree falling, and I knew it was open. They were inside. Footsteps in my cabin, multiple sets, moving through my space, my father's space. I could hear them breathing, these deep, huffing sounds. Furniture being moved, cabinets opening. One set of footsteps approached the bathroom door. The doorknob turned, tested, then turned harder. I pressed my back against the bathtub, phone clutched in one hand, rifle in the other, and waited for the door to give way. Dennis, are you still there? The dispatcher's voice seemed far away, like she was calling from another world. They're in my house, I whispered. They're right outside the bathroom door. The doorknob rattled again, harder this time, then stopped. I could hear breathing on the other side, deep and rhythmic. Something scraped against the wood fingernails, but too thick, too long. Deputies are 10 minutes out, Dennis. Multiple units responding. Just hold on. 10 minutes. Might as well have been 10 hours. The breathing moved away from the door. I heard them going through my things, drawers opening, glass breaking in the kitchen. They weren't destroying everything like animals would. They were searching, investigating, learning. Then one of them made a sound that froze my blood. Not quite speech, but structured, intentional. 3 distinct syllables, almost like a question. Another responded from the living room. Different tones, same pattern. They were talking to each other. They're communicating, I told the dispatcher. They have language. Stay calm, Dennis. Stay quiet. Something slammed into the bathroom door. The whole frame shook. Another impact, and I saw the wood crack near the hinges. They'd figured out the weak points. I raised the rifle, aimed at chest height, where I thought one would be standing. I will shoot, I said loudly. Back away from the door. The pounding stopped. Silence for maybe 5 seconds. Then a sound I'll never forget, something between a laugh and a growl, mocking and intelligent. They understood me. They understood, and they weren't afraid. The door exploded inward on the 3rd hit, hinges tearing from the frame. I fired, the .30-06 deafening in the small space, but hit nothing. The doorway was empty. They'd knocked it down and pulled back, testing my reaction. A hand reached around the door frame, massive, covered in dark hair, fingers too long, too thick. It felt along the wall like it was mapping the space. I fired again, splintering the door frame, and the hand withdrew. Shots fired! I screamed into the phone. I'm shooting, but there... A rock came through the bathroom window behind me, showering me with glass. I spun, fired blindly at the window, pumped another round. Then I heard them. Sirens. Multiple sirens. Getting closer. The creatures heard them too. Immediately, the footsteps retreated through my cabin. The back door, what was left of it, banged against the wall as they left. I heard them calling to each other outside, those same structured sounds. And then nothing. I stayed in that bathroom, gun trained on the empty door frame, until I heard car doors slamming and Deputy Harlan's voice calling my name. Dennis, it's Jim Harlan. Are you injured? Bathroom, I managed to call out. They were just here, maybe 2 minutes ago. 4 deputies entered my house, weapons drawn, flashlights sweeping. Harlan found me, still crouched in the bathtub, covered in glass, shaking like I had hypothermia. Jesus Christ, he said, looking at the destroyed door, the bullet holes, the chaos. How many were there? 3, maybe more. I couldn't stop shaking. They were inside for 40 minutes. 40 minutes, Jim. He helped me out of the tub, checked me for injuries. Cuts from the glass, nothing serious. My hands were raw from gripping the rifle so tight. The phone was still connected, the dispatcher still on the line. They're gone, Harlan told her. Scene secure. We're going to need everyone. My cabin looked like a war zone. Every window broken, furniture overturned, muddy prints tracked throughout. The deputies worked in pairs, documenting everything while I sat on what was left of my porch, a blanket around my shoulders, watching them process what shouldn't exist. Dennis. I looked up to find Sergeant Patricia Reeves standing there. I'd never met her, but I knew who she was, ran the whole rural division. She was the type who showed up when things went sideways in ways that couldn't be explained. Sergeant, walk me through it. Everything. So I did. From the wood knocks to the coordinated attack to the way they'd tested my defenses like they were solving a problem. She listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding to one of her deputies who was taking notes. The sounds they made, she said when I finished. You said they were communicating? It was language, structure, responses, patterns, not animal calls. She studied me for a long moment, then turned to Harlan. Secure the scene. No one else comes up here. No press, no neighbors, nobody. Yes, ma'am. She made a phone call, walking away so I couldn't hear. When she came back, her expression was carefully neutral. Mr. Paulson, we need to discuss your options. My options? This property is no longer safe for human habitation. We can provide temporary accommodation while you make arrangements. You want me to leave, just abandon. My father's land. I want you to survive. Her tone was flat, professional. Whatever territorial dispute exists here, you're not equipped to resolve it. Deputy Harlan emerged from the cabin carrying evidence bags. One contained dark, coarse hair. Another held one of the rocks that had been thrown granite, about 25 pounds, with what looked like blood on one edge. My blood from the flying glass. Found something else, he told Reeves quietly. But I heard him anyway. Tool marks on the door. Whatever tore it off used leverage, not just strength. 2 black SUVs pulled up my driveway, no department markings, tinted windows. The men who got out wore suits, not uniforms. They didn't introduce themselves, just started talking quietly with Reeves. "Who are they?" I asked Harlan. "Above my pay grade," he said, but his expression told me he knew exactly who they were. One of them approached me, clean-shaven, maybe 40, eyes that gave away nothing. "Mr. Paulson, we're consultants with Wildlife Management. We understand you've had some unusual activity on your property." Wildlife Management. I almost laughed. "That's what you're calling this?" "We're calling it a situation that needs resolution. How long has your family owned this land?" "Since 1971. My father bought it." "Did he ever mention any unusual encounters? Anything that might help us understand the pattern here?" "Pattern?" The man exchanged glances with his partner. "Mr. Paulson, this property sits on what we call a corridor, a traditional travel route that's been used for a very long time. Your presence here is creating conflict." "My presence? This is my land." "Legally, yes, but legality doesn't always align with reality." He pulled out a business card, blank except for a phone number. "We can help with relocation assistance, new property, moving expenses, compensation for losses. All we ask is discretion. You want to buy me out. We want to prevent further escalation." "What happened tonight was a warning. Next time, there won't be a next time," I interrupted. He studied me with those empty eyes. "No, Mr. Paulson, there won't." The next morning, those 2 federal agents returned. They sat across from me at what was left of my kitchen table, the morning light streaming through plastic sheets I'd taped over the broken windows. "Mr. Paulson, we need to discuss your father," the lead agent said. His partner had a briefcase full of documents. "What about him? How much did he tell you about this property before he passed?" "Just that it was a good place, quiet, away from everything." I was exhausted, running on 2 hours of sleep and too much coffee. "What does this have to do with anything?" They exchanged glances. The partner pulled out a map, one of those topographical ones the Forest Service uses. My property was marked with a red square, but there were other markings too, dotted lines running through the forest, converging and splitting like veins. "Your property sits on what we call a corridor," the lead agent said. "These are traditional migration routes that have been used for thousands of years, maybe longer." "Migration routes for what?" "For a population that was here before European settlement, before Native American settlement possibly. A population that's learned to avoid human contact but has never truly left." I stared at the map. The dotted lines ran right through where Thor had died. "You're telling me the government knows about these things?" "We manage the situation. Have been since 1947, officially. Unofficially, much longer." He leaned back. "Your father understood this." "That's impossible. He would have told me." The partner pulled out another document. "Did your father ever mention the Civilian Conservation Corps?" "He worked for them in the 30s, during the Depression, building trails and..." I stopped, looked at the document. It was a personnel file, my father's name at the top. "What is this?" "Your father's CCC unit had an encounter in 1936. 3 men disappeared. 2 others saw what took them. The survivors were relocated, given new identities. Your father was one of them." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. He knew. All those years, he knew what was out there. He knew how to coexist. The property boundaries he maintained. The areas he avoided. The offerings. Offerings? Food left at specific locations. Salt licks that weren't for deer. Your father maintained a treaty, Mr. Paulson. One you didn't know existed. So Thor dying, that was a violation response. Your dog marked territory across established boundaries. When you didn't correct the behavior, they did. The attack on your cabin was the second escalation. There won't be a third. You're saying if I stay, you won't stay. It wasn't a question. We're prepared to offer you $80,000 above market value for immediate relocation. Cash, no contingencies. You'll sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement and cease all contact with local authorities about these incidents. And if I refuse? The lead agent's expression didn't change. Then we can't guarantee your safety, and any incidents that occur will be classified as your responsibility. No emergency response, no investigation, no insurance claims. They were giving me an out, but it wasn't really a choice. How many other families have you relocated? From this corridor? In Washington State? 17 since 1980. Nationally? He shrugged. That's classified. I looked at the map again, all those dotted lines crossing through wilderness. They're everywhere, aren't they? Neither agent answered, which was answer enough. Diane Morrison from Morrison Realty arrived that afternoon, dressed like she was showing a mansion instead of surveying a destroyed cabin. She didn't even blink at the plastic sheets over the windows or the demolished back door. "Mr. Paulson," she said, shaking my hand with a practiced smile. "I understand you're looking for a quick sale. News travels fast. In certain circles." She pulled out her clipboard, already filled with paperwork. "I have a cash buyer ready. Cascade Logging Company. They're interested in the timber rights." "How much?" $42,000. "The property's worth at least 60. Was worth 60. She gestured at the damage. "And that's assuming normal market conditions. These aren't normal conditions, are they?" She knew. Of course she knew. "How many of these sales have you handled?" Her smile never wavered. "I specialize in unique situations requiring discrete solutions. Your property will be in good hands. They'll clear-cut it. That's the plan. Complete harvest within 6 months." She studied me. Sometimes a fresh start is best for everyone involved. I wanted to argue, wanted to fight for my father's land, but I was exhausted and scared. The federal money plus this sale would be enough to start over anywhere. "I need to walk the property once more," I said. "Get some things. Of course, I'll wait here." I headed toward the tree line, not sure what I was looking for, maybe just closure. The forest was quiet, but not silent, normal quiet, with birds and squirrels and the wind in the branches. About 50 yards from where Thor had died, I found it, a structure made of woven branches and logs, about 8 feet tall and 12 feet across. It wasn't random. It was deliberate, architectural. The branches were bent and held with some kind of natural binding, creating a dome shape with an opening facing north. Inside, the ground was worn smooth. I took out the disposable camera I'd bought, snapped several pictures despite the agent's warning to leave things alone. I needed proof, even if I could never share it. Walking back, I found something else. Scratches on a Douglas fir, too high for any bear to make, forming a pattern. Not random claw marks, but deliberate lines, 4 horizontal, 1 diagonal through them. A symbol. A warning. A boundary marker I'd never known to look for. When I returned, Diane had the contracts ready. "Find what you were looking for?" she asked. "Yeah. The logging crew will start Monday. You should be gone by then." "What happens to them?" "The loggers?" Her smile faltered for just a second. "They're professionals. They know the risks of working in remote forests." "Do they know the real risks?" "Mr. Paulson, some knowledge is a burden. These men have families to feed. They don't need to know everything, just enough to be careful." I signed the papers, each signature feeling like a betrayal of my father's memory. But maybe he'd understand. He'd kept his own secrets after all. "One last thing," Diane said as she gathered the documents. "That structure you found? The dome? It won't be there when the crew arrives. They never are. They move them? Every time. Like they know when humans are coming." She snapped her briefcase shut. "Almost like someone warns them." I looked at her sharply, but she was already heading to her car, leaving me alone in what was left of my father's dream. My last night in the cabin, I couldn't sleep. Every shadow could be them watching, every creak of the old wood could be them approaching. I'd packed most of my things, but I saved Dad's belongings for last. His clothes still smelled like pipe tobacco and sawdust. His tools were organized exactly how he'd left them, each one worn smooth from decades of use. In the bottom drawer of his dresser, under some old flannel shirts, I found a leather journal I'd never seen before. The cover was cracked with age, the pages yellowed. Dad's handwriting filled it neat and precise, the penmanship of a generation that took pride in such things. The first entry was dated July 15th, 1973. "The visitors came again last night. Left the salt lick near the big cedar untouched but took the apples. They prefer fruit to anything else. Must remember to keep Thor," that was his dog before mine, same name, "inside after dark during their active season." I sat down hard on his bed, the journal shaking in my hands. Entry after entry documented encounters, observations, patterns. He'd mapped their movements, noted their preferences, Learned their boundaries. October 3rd, 1974. Bound marker tree, 5 scratches, diagonal line. Marks northern boundary of their corridor. Must not cut wood beyond this point. March 12th, 1978. They left something for me. A deer haunch, perfectly butchered, at the offering site. Think this is acknowledgement of the winter food I've been leaving. Relationship established. He'd been feeding them. For over 20 years, my father had been maintaining some kind of treaty with these creatures, and he'd never told me. But the more I read, the more I understood why. August 1st, 1981. Dennis visited this weekend. Almost told him, but couldn't. How do you explain something like this? He'd think his old man had lost it. Better he doesn't know. When I'm gone, they'll move on, find new corridors. The land will just be land again. But he'd been wrong. They hadn't moved on. They'd waited, watched, maybe even hoped the son would continue what the father had started. And I'd failed a test I didn't even know I was taking. The last entry was dated December 15th, 1995, just a month before he died. Getting too old for this. The protocols, the boundaries, the constant vigilance. Dennis will inherit the property soon. Should tell him, but words fail me. How do you explain coexistence with something that shouldn't exist? Maybe it's better if this knowledge dies with me. They're not monsters. Just neighbors we were. Never meant to have. If Dennis stays, they'll either teach him or drive him off. Either way, the choice won't be mine to make. I closed the journal. Tears I hadn't expected burning my eyes. He'd tried to protect me from this burden, but his silence had cost me everything. Cost Thor everything. I went to the kitchen window, looked out at the darkness. I understand now, I said to the forest. The boundaries, the offerings, all of it. I'm sorry I didn't know. I'm sorry about everything. The woods remained silent, but it felt different somehow, like an acknowledgement, or maybe a goodbye. I found the marker tree he'd described, the 5 scratches still visible, though softened by decades of growth. The offering site was a flat rock near the creek, worn smooth by years of use. I left the last of my food there, some canned peaches, beef jerky, a bag of apples I'd bought for the drive. In the morning, it was gone. In its place was a single, perfect arrowhead, napped from black. Obsidian. Unlike anything local tribes had ever made. I picked it up, felt its weight, its careful craftsmanship. A parting gift, maybe. Or a warning to never return. I packed the journal with the arrowhead, wrapped carefully inside. These were the only things I'd take that really mattered. The only proof I'd keep of what my father had known. What I'd learned too late. The federal agents had given me 72 hours to vacate. I was leaving with 24 to spare, but it already felt like I'd stayed too long. Some boundaries, once crossed, can never be uncrossed. Some neighbors, once angered, never forget. The closing was scheduled for 9 a.m. at the First National Bank in Silverdale. I arrived early, sat in my truck watching the rain streak down the windshield. The logging company representative was already there, a younger guy named Brad who kept checking his watch like he had somewhere more important to be. "Mr. Paulson," he said when I walked in, shaking my hand with practiced corporate enthusiasm. "Excited to get this property developed. That timber is worth a fortune. You're going to clear cut it? Every marketable tree. We'll have crews in there Monday, should be done within 6 months. Market's hot for old-growth lumber right now." I thought about warning him. Thought about the marker trees, the boundaries, the corridors. But looking at his eager face, his company polo shirt, his absolute certainty that everything in the forest existed solely for human profit, I knew it wouldn't matter. There are some areas you should avoid. I tried anyway. Near the north boundary especially. The terrain there is unstable. Our boys know what they're doing. Been logging this peninsula for 40 years. The papers were signed by 9:30. I handed over the keys. Though they wouldn't need them, the cabin would be bulldozed within the week to make room for equipment staging. Brad handed me a check, pumped my hand again, and left talking. On his cell phone about cubic feet and board prices. I sat in the bank parking lot afterward, not sure where to go. Deputy Harlan found me there an hour later. "Heard you closed," he said, leaning against my truck. "Where are you heading?" "Arizona. Maybe New Mexico. Somewhere with more desert than trees." He nodded, understanding. Probably for the best. He looked around, making sure we were alone. "That logging crew that's going in. You warned them?" "Tried. They didn't want to hear it." They never do. He pulled out a cigarette, thought better of it, put it away. There was a crew went into similar property back in '91, up near Quilcene. Same situation, family driven off, land sold to loggers. What happened? 2 men disappeared, equipment destroyed. Crew pulled out after 3 days, said the job was cursed. Company took a total loss. Land went back to the state. He met my eyes. Your property will probably end up the same way. You think they'll hurt the mill? Loggers? I think they'll defend their territory. Always have. He straightened up. Dennis, off the record, your father knew what he was doing. He found a way to coexist that most people never manage. Don't blame yourself for not knowing the rules of a game nobody told you you were playing. Will the department look for them if they disappear? The loggers? We'll look. We'll find tracks, maybe some equipment. File reports about equipment failure or bear attacks. Same as always. He started walking away, then turned back. That 911 call you made, both of them, they've been classified. National security. They'll never see the light of day. A week later, I was unpacking boxes in a Phoenix apartment when I saw the news item online. 2 loggers missing in Kitsap County Forest. The article was brief, mentioned equipment malfunction, dangerous terrain. The search was called off after 72 hours. The logging company pulled out, citing unforeseen geological instabilities. I tried writing a letter to a BIGFOOT research organization, laying out everything that had happened, including GPS coordinates and dates. I sent it anonymously from a Phoenix post office. 6 months later, I found it posted on their website with a note. Interesting account, but lacks verifiable evidence. Likely hoax or misidentification of known wildlife. I became David Prescott 2 months after that, legally changing my name through an Arizona court. Dennis Paulson disappeared from public record, just another person who walked into the woods of the Pacific Northwest and came out different, diminished, carrying knowledge that nobody wanted to believe. The property, last I checked, was purchased by the state and designated as a wildlife preservation area. No public access, no logging, no development. The official reason was protecting endangered spotted owl habitat. I know better. They're still there, still using their corridors, still living the way they have for thousands of years. And somewhere in a Kitsap County evidence room, there's a plaster cast of an 18-inch footprint that doesn't officially exist, waiting for someone to ask the right questions. But nobody ever does. The filmmaker found me in 2010. I don't know how I'd been careful, changed my name, moved twice since Phoenix. But there she was at my door in Tucson, holding a digital recorder and a folder full of printouts from conspiracy websites. Mr. Paulson, she said. Or should I say, Mr. Prescott. I don't know what you're talking about. The 911 calls from February '96, they've been circulating in certain communities for years. Audio analysts have verified they're authentic. I've tracked the property records, the police reports, the federal involvement. It all leads to you. I stood there in my doorway, looking at this young woman, with her eager eyes, and her certainty that the truth needed to be told. I can't help you. Please, just verify that it happened. Off the record, no cameras. People deserve to know. Maybe it was loneliness, or maybe I was just tired of carrying it alone. I let her in. We talked for 3 hours. I didn't let her record anything, didn't sign anything, just talked. Told her about Thor, about the siege, about my father's journal. She listened without interrupting, taking handwritten notes. The property is a state preserve now, she said when I finished. No access allowed. The state patrol runs regular flights over it, but no one goes in on foot. They're protecting it, or protecting us from it. The logging company Cascade. They lost 4 men total before they pulled out. 2 were never found. 4 men. I hadn't known it was that many. I still have nightmares, I told her. Not every night anymore, but enough. I dream about Thor, about those green eyes in my flashlight beam. Sometimes I dream they're outside my window here in Tucson, 2,000 miles. From their territory, come to finish what they started. Do you ever think about going back? Never. I can't own another dog. Tried once, but every time it barked, I was back in that cabin. Can't go camping, can't even walk in the woods. That life is gone. She packed up her notes, thanked me for my time. At the door, she turned back. What do you think they are? I think they're what we were before we became we. Or maybe they're what we could have been if we'd taken a different path. Either way, they're not monsters. They're just trying to survive in a world that's running out of room for them. Your father understood that. My father understood a lot of things he never taught me. The documentary never aired. She told me later that her funding dried up, that networks weren't interested, that the evidence was too thin. But I think she realized what I'd learned: some knowledge is too heavy to share. Some boundaries are meant to stand. She did send me one thing: a photograph from a state survey flight over my old property. Shot in infrared, it showed 3 large heat signatures moving through the forest in single file. They were following the exact path my father had marked as their corridor 40 years ago. They're still there, still walking their ancient paths, still maintaining boundaries most people will never know exist. And, somewhere in Arizona, an old man who used to be Dennis Paulson keeps an obsidian arrowhead in his nightstand drawer, the last proof of a treaty he never knew existed until it was too late to honor it.